Watch yourself the next time someone says something that stings. A dismissive comment. A message with an edge to it. A remark that lands wrong. Notice how fast it happens. Before you have decided anything, the reply is already forming. The defense is already loading. Your jaw has already tightened, your pulse has already shifted, and some part of you is already composing the thing you will say back. The entire reaction is underway before a single conscious choice has been made. Someone spoke, and your inner state changed on command. We have been trained to call this strength. The fast comeback, the sharp reply, the refusal to let anything pass unanswered. The culture reads these as signs of a person who cannot be pushed around. The loudest voice in the room is assumed to be the strongest. The one who always has a response is assumed to be in control. And so we spend years sharpening our reactivity, getting faster and louder, mistaking the speed of our response for the strength of our character. The Stoics rejected this assumption at the root. They saw what most people spend a lifetime refusing to see, that the person instantly pulled into anger, into defense, into noise, is not powerful at all. They are the most controllable person in the room, because anyone who knows which words set them off holds the controls. A man who erupts on cue is being operated by whoever provokes him. That is not strength. It is a remote control, and the provoker is holding it. And so they arrived at a conclusion that sounds almost absurd in a world built on volume, that the most powerful response available to a human being, in the moment of provocation or crisis or loss, is very often stillness. Not the stillness of weakness or absence, not having nothing to say. The stillness of a person who has so completely governed their own interior that the provocation simply finds nothing to grab. This is the silence the Stoics meant. And it is not the absence of power. It is the visible shape of it. Welcome to Logostoic. What you are about to hear runs directly against an instinct you have spent your whole life reinforcing. The instinct that meeting force with force, noise with noise, is how a strong person operates. This video makes the opposite case. That silence and stillness, the disciplined kind, are among the most formidable capacities a human being can build. This is not comfortable material, and it is not for everyone. It is for the person who is tired of being operated by whatever happens to be in front of them, and ready to take the controls back. If that is you, like this video, subscribe to Logostoic, and stay for all 3 movements of what follows, because each one goes deeper than the last. If you are ready to stop being moved by every voice and start governing the quiet underneath them, prove it. Type this in the comments right now. I govern the silence. Now let's begin. Begin with the most ordinary form of silence, the one you practice or fail to practice dozens of times a day, silence in the presence of other people. Most of us experience it as a deficit, a gap in the conversation that needs filling. The absence of our own voice, which feels somehow like absence of self. And in that framing, staying quiet feels like losing ground, like conceding, like weakness, like letting the other person win. So we fill the space. We reply before the other person has finished. We offer our view before we have understood theirs. Epictetus saw silence completely differently, and he had earned the right to. He began his life as a slave, a man who owned nothing, who was permitted to say almost nothing, whose entire existence was lived at the mercy of another person's word. From inside that condition, he arrived at one of the most disarming observations in all of philosophy, that nature gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth, so that we might listen twice as much as we speak. Read past the surface of that line. It is not a rule about manners. It is a claim about where understanding actually comes from, and the claim is that it comes from receiving, not from broadcasting. Consider what is actually happening when you speak before you have fully listened. You are not adding anything new to the exchange. You are replaying what you already think, running the same loop of assumptions you walked in with, now out loud. You learn nothing. You discover nothing about the person in front of you that you did not already assume. In the most literal sense, you are closed, a sealed system, processing only its own contents, mistaking the sound of its own voice for engagement with the world. The person who cannot stop talking is not dominating the conversation. They are absent from it. Modern psychology has measured this with some precision. Research on what is called listening to respond versus listening to understand finds that most people, in most conversations, are doing the former, mentally rehearsing their reply while the other person is still speaking, and as a result retaining strikingly little of what was actually said. Studies on conversational memory routinely find that people recall only a fraction of what they have just heard, in large part because they were composing rather than receiving. The Stoic prescription to listen twice as much as you speak is, in modern terms, a direct intervention in this failure. It forces the mind out of rehearsal mode and into reception, which is the only mode in which understanding is possible at all. And here is the part that should genuinely unsettle anyone who values being sharp. The speed you are so proud of is the very thing keeping you ignorant. Every instant you spend formulating your reply, while the other person is still speaking, is an instant you are not actually hearing them. The faster you are to respond, the less you have taken in. What feels like quickness of mind is, underneath, a refusal to be changed by new information. The genuinely strong mind is slow here, deliberately. It lets the other person finish, lets the silence sit, and uses the quiet to actually understand rather than to reload. Seneca approached the same truth from a darker and more honest angle. He observed that the capacity for genuine silence is almost never something a person is born with. It is earned, and it is usually earned through pain. Through the specific, memorable cost of having spoken at exactly the wrong moment and watched the damage spread. Silence, he wrote, is a hard lesson that suffering teaches. The people who have truly mastered it are not the naturally quiet ones. They are the ones who have said the unforgivable thing, watched it land, and resolved never to be operated by their own mouth again. Their silence is not temperament. It is a scar that became a discipline. This is why the discipline of listening is not passive and not soft. It is one of the hardest forms of self-government there is, because it requires holding back the thing that most wants to escape, the reply, the correction, the clever point, long enough to actually receive what is in front of you. The person who can do this has a profound advantage in every room they enter, not because they dominate it, but because they alone are actually learning what is happening in it while everyone else is busy reloading. But silence is only half of the discipline of speech. The other half is what you do when you finally do speak, because the Stoics understood that words are not merely sounds we make to express what we already think. Words are architecture. Every sentence you speak builds something or destroys something. Every exchange either opens a door or closes one, strengthens a relationship or quietly fractures it, preserves another person's dignity, or strips it away in front of them. The Stoics had a word for this disciplined, deliberate use of language as a moral act, logos. Not speech as venting. Speech as construction. There is a story from 19th century China that has been studied for over 100 years precisely because it captures what this looks like under pressure. Li Hongzong, one of the most powerful officials of the Qing dynasty, was served a traditional dessert soup garnished with finely ground black sesame seeds, a dish he had never encountered. He looked at the dark flecks scattered across the surface and concluded, with the full arrogance of a man used to deference, that the bowl was filthy. He shoved it away in contempt. And the innkeeper found himself in a moment that would define everything. One of the most powerful men in the province had just publicly mistaken a delicacy for dirt. The innkeeper had two obvious paths, and both led off a cliff. He could correct the official directly, explain that the flecks were sesame, not filth, and in doing so humiliate a powerful man in front of witnesses, which would have cost him everything. Or he could grovel, apologizing for a fault that did not exist, which would have confirmed the insult and cheapened them both. Instead, he chose a third thing that required extraordinary composure. He absorbed the official's contempt without resentment, apologized with complete grace, and then reframed the dish in a way that turned the official's ignorance into curiosity rather than shame. Li Hongzong, moved not in spite of being corrected, but because of the dignity with which it was done, rewarded him generously and praised him afterward. The innkeeper did not win by being right. He was right the entire time, and being right was the least useful thing he had. He won by understanding that his words were architecture, and that he could build a structure in which a powerful man kept his dignity, and the truth still got through. This is logos in practice, not the suppression of truth, and not the blunt delivery of it, but the disciplined shaping of speech so that it constructs rather than destroys. Most people, in the moment of friction, reach for the sentence that wins. The Stoic reaches for the sentence that builds. There is a discipline the Stoics recommended for exactly this, and it has survived as one of the most quietly useful filters ever devised. Before speaking into any moment of tension, hold 3 questions in sequence. Is what I am about to say true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? Not all 3 are required every time, but at least one should be present, and if none of them are, the disciplined answer is silence. Notice what this filter actually does. It inserts a deliberate pause between the impulse to speak and the speech itself. And that pause is the entire space in which a person stops being operated by their own reactivity. The unfiltered mouth says whatever rises. The governed one runs it through the gate first. You have been treating the fast reply as strength, when it was only keeping you from hearing anything at all. The quickest mouth is the deafest ear. Stop talking. Listen. Comment below. I listen before I speak. The silence of listening is the entry point. But it is the easy version, because the provocation there is mild, an unfinished sentence, a wrong opinion, the small itch to interrupt. The deeper discipline begins where the stakes rise. In the presence of genuine provocation, real attack, the deliberate insult designed to make you react. This is where most people who can manage a polite silence in conversation discover that their stillness was only ever skin deep. Here is what almost no one notices about an insult. Hidden inside it is a small experiment, and you are the subject. The person delivering it, whether they understand this or not, is running a test. Their words are a question aimed directly at you. Can you be operated from the outside? Will you react? Will you hand me the power to determine, with a single sentence, what state your mind spends the next hour in? Every insult is a hand reaching for your controls. And most people, without realizing it, hand the controls over instantly. They let the provoker decide their mood, their afternoon, sometimes their entire day. Marcus Aurelius, in the private journal he never intended anyone to read, kept returning to this as one of the central traps of a human life. Anger, he reminded himself, is a kind of temporary madness, a brief insanity that clouds the judgment and leaves nothing behind but the wreckage and the regret. And crucially, he understood every instance of it as a surrender, no matter how justified the anger felt in the moment. To be pulled into it was to let an external event reach inside and seize the one territory that was supposed to be his alone, his own mind. The angry man has not asserted his power at all. He has handed it away, entirely, to the very person who provoked him. Epictetus gave this the theoretical spine that holds the whole of Stoic practice upright. He called it the dichotomy of control, and it is deceptively simple. Everything that exists falls into one of exactly two categories. In the first are the things genuinely within your power, your own judgments, your intentions, your values, your responses. In the second is everything else, other people's behavior, the outcomes of events, the way the world chooses to treat you, the words others choose to throw. His argument was not that the second category does not matter. It was that confusing the two categories is the source of nearly all the suffering a human being inflicts on themselves. Watch how this applies to the insult, because it dissolves it completely. When someone attacks you with words, those words belong entirely to the second category. They have already been spoken. You cannot reach back into the past and unspeak them. They are not yours and never were. The only thing that has ever been yours is what happens next, the movement that rises inside you, and what you choose to do with it. The provocation lives in the category you do not control. The response lives in the category you do. And the entire space between those two facts is where your freedom actually lives. There is a piece of neuroscience that maps onto this with surprising exactness. When a provocation lands, the brain's threat response fires fast, the surge of reactivity that has you halfway into a reply before you have thought anything. But that initial surge is brief, and a narrow window opens just behind it in which the slower, deliberate part of the mind can engage before the reaction becomes action. The entire Stoic practice of the pause, stop, breathe, ask whether this is within your control, is a method for living inside that window rather than being swept past it. The provocateur is betting you will not find the gap. The trained mind has learned exactly where it is, and steps into it on purpose. Marcus gave this an image that has outlived almost everything else he wrote. The mind that has been properly governed is like a rock at the edge of the sea. The waves come, and they crash, and they have always crashed, and they always will. The rock does not negotiate with the waves. It does not become enraged at the water. It does not dissolve into the ocean because the ocean is violent. It simply remains what it is. And here is the part most people miss. Over time, it is not the water that wears down the rock. It is the rock that shapes the water, bending the entire current around its stillness. The person who cannot be provoked does not just survive the provocation. They quietly reshape every interaction around the fact that they cannot be moved. But there is a far harder version of this discipline, and the Stoics did not flinch from it. Silence in the face of an insult is one thing. Stillness in the face of genuine loss, real failure, real injustice, the kind of devastation that no reframing can soften, is another order entirely. This is where Stoic philosophy makes its most demanding claim, that the right response to what genuinely cannot be changed is not gritted endurance, but something closer to acceptance, so complete it becomes a kind of embrace. Marcus called it amor fati, the love of one's fate. Not the love of the easy parts, the love of all of it, including the parts that broke him. And his life earns him the right to say it, because it was not a sheltered one. As emperor, he faced a plague that moved through the empire for years and killed millions. He waged exhausting wars on multiple frontiers, often in the field himself, year after year. He was betrayed by men he had trusted completely, including a general he had elevated. And he carried private griefs heavy enough to break a lesser man's public dignity. None of this was numbed by his philosophy. His journal makes painfully clear that he felt the full weight of every bit of it. What the philosophy changed was not his sensitivity to the pain. It was his relationship to it. He did not waste himself asking why these things were happening to him. He asked, instead, what they required of him. The deepest confirmation of this principle in the modern era came from a place that makes philosophical language feel almost weightless. Viktor Frankl, the Austrian psychiatrist, survived 4 Nazi concentration camps and lost most of his family inside them. The guards stripped him of everything that can be stripped from a person: his possessions, his freedom, his physical dignity, the people he loved. And in that absolute extremity, he observed the one thing they could not reach, no matter what they did to his body: the freedom to choose his own orientation toward what was happening to him. Everything could be taken, he concluded, except the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. Even there, especially there, place Frankl beside Marcus, and the point becomes undeniable. One was an emperor with absolute power, the other was a prisoner with none. And both arrived at the identical discovery, that the external event, the plague, the betrayal, the camp, the loss, belongs to the category you do not control, and that the freedom to choose your response to it is the one possession no circumstance can confiscate. The wave crashes. It was always going to crash. The only question that was ever yours to answer is who you will be while it does. That is not resignation. It is the deepest form of stillness a human being can reach. The stillness that holds even when everything that could be taken has been. It is worth being precise about what amor fati is not, because it is the most misread idea in all of Stoicism. It is not pretending the loss does not hurt. It is not telling yourself the injustice was secretly good. Marcus felt the full weight of his griefs, and Frankl never once minimized the horror of the camps. Amor fati is something harder and more honest than positive thinking. It is the refusal to add a second layer of suffering, the layer made of resistance, of why me, of this should not be happening, on top of the first layer that reality has already delivered. The event is the first arrow. The mind's furious argument with the event is the second arrow, and the second one we fire into ourselves. Stillness, at this depth, is simply the decision to stop firing the second arrow. You have been handing your controls to anyone who knew which words would set you off, and to every event that did not go your way. The wave was never yours. The rock is. Let it crash. Stay still. Type below, the wave is not mine. There is a final form of stillness, and it is the one the modern world has made nearly impossible. Silence with others. Stillness under provocation. These happen in the presence of other people. But the deepest stillness happens when there is no one else there at all. It is the stillness of genuine solitude, being alone with your own mind, with nothing to react to, no one to manage, no audience to perform for. And it is precisely this that almost no one can tolerate anymore, which is exactly why it has become the most valuable. Epictetus gave his students a warning that most people in his time, and almost everyone in ours, has refused to take seriously. Guard the circle of those you allow into your life. Not because other people are dangerous in any simple sense, but because the company you keep reshapes you slowly, invisibly, in directions you would never have chosen consciously if you could have seen the change happening. You become the conversations you spend your time inside. And if those conversations are nothing but noise, you slowly become a person made of noise, with no quiet center left to return to. Seneca stated the principle with his usual unsentimental edge. Better to be alone, he held, than to move in a crowd that is heading nowhere worth going. And the Roman Stoics were not theorizing from a position of comfort. They lived and worked inside one of the most socially pressurized environments in human history, an imperial court where every relationship was political, every conversation was watched, and conformity was the basic mechanism of survival. They knew from direct, daily experience what prolonged immersion in noise does to a person's capacity for genuine thought. It does not just distract the mind. It slowly removes the mind's ability to find itself at all. Consider what solitude actually offers, because it is not what most people fear it is. It is not absence, not loneliness, not the lack of something. It is presence. Presence to yourself, to what you actually value underneath the values you perform for others. To the questions your ordinary social life never leaves room to ask. It is the one condition in which you finally stop managing other people's perceptions of you for long enough to discover what you yourself actually think. Without it, you can go an entire life without once hearing your own mind clearly over the noise of everyone else's. Even Einstein, whose work remade our understanding of space and time, described extended solitude not as a break from the real work, but as the precondition for it, the only state in which the deepest problems could be approached at all, because they simply cannot be reached from inside the noise. The pattern holds far beyond physics. The clarity a person is desperately looking for is almost never found in more input, more conversation, more stimulation. It is found in the quiet that the modern world has trained us to flee from the instant it appears, by reaching reflexively for the phone. Neuroscience has given this an unexpected confirmation. When the mind is left genuinely unoccupied, with no input and no task and no screen, a particular network in the brain becomes active, associated with self-reflection, the consolidation of memory, moral reasoning, and the kind of long-range thinking that connects who you have been to who you are becoming. It engages largely when the noise stops. The implication is sobering. A person who never tolerates silence has effectively switched off the machinery by which a human being integrates their own life. The Stoics could not have described it in these terms, but they observed the result directly. The mind that is never alone never quite becomes whole. And that reflex is the whole problem in miniature. The moment a gap of silence opens, in a line, in an elevator, in the first 10 seconds of waking, the hand moves to the screen before the mind has even registered the quiet. We have built a life with no spaces left in it, and in eliminating the spaces we have eliminated the only room in which a person actually meets themselves. The Stoics protected that room deliberately. We have to do something harder. We have to rebuild it, against an entire industry engineered to keep it from ever opening. The rebuilding is not complicated, which is not the same as saying it is easy. It means protecting some genuine quiet each day, not guided meditation, not ambient music, not a podcast playing softly in the background, all of which are simply more refined forms of input. Just silence, where the mind is allowed to move without direction and, crucially, without an audience. 20 minutes of it is enough to begin, and almost everyone who tries discovers the same two things in sequence. First, that it is far more uncomfortable than they expected, because the noise was hiding something, and second, that on the far side of that discomfort is the clearest thinking they have done in months. The discomfort is not a reason to stop. It is the evidence that the room had been shut for too long. You have filled every silence with a screen, and in doing so you have removed the only room where you could actually meet yourself. The noise is not resting you. It is hiding you from you. Turn the noise off. Now, write in the comments, I seek the quiet. 3 forms of one discipline. The silence that lets you actually hear another person, and the care that builds with your words rather than destroying. The stillness that refuses to hand your controls to whoever provokes you, and that holds even when the loss is real and permanent. And the solitude in which, finally, you meet the only person whose mind you can actually govern. They are not 3 separate techniques. They are one capacity, seen at 3 depths. The capacity to stop being driven by what is in front of you and start being governed by something you chose. Marcus Aurelius compressed the whole of it into a single line worth carrying. You have power over your mind, not over outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Everything outside you, the words of others, the movement of events, the behavior of the world, was never yours to command. Everything inside you, your responses, your attention, your values, your character, belongs entirely to you, and no external force can reach it without your permission. Silence and stillness are simply what it looks like from the outside when a person has finally understood the difference and started living inside it. This is why the silence the Stoics practiced is not weakness, and the stillness is not surrender. They are the visible evidence of an invisible discipline, the outward sign that a person has stopped being operated by whatever happens to be in front of them, and started being governed from within. The loudest person in the room gave their controls away long ago. The still one is holding their own. And anyone watching closely can tell immediately which of the two is actually strong. You have power over your mind, not over outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. That single line from Marcus Aurelius is the whole architecture of everything we covered today. The silence, the stillness, the solitude, all of it built on that one recognition. If it reached something real in you, the work ahead is not complicated. It is daily. And daily is harder than complicated, which is exactly why so few people ever do it. If this video gave you something more substantial than the usual advice about staying calm, consider liking it. Not as a reflex, but because there are a great many people right now being operated by every provocation that comes their way, exhausted and not knowing why, who need exactly this, and will only find it if those who valued it carry it to them. Every like is a real act of putting this in front of one of them. And leave a comment. Write down the one place in your life where you most often hand your controls away, the person, the situation, the provocation that reliably operates you, and what it would mean to meet it with stillness instead. The Stoics believe the examined life begins precisely there, with that kind of honesty about where you are not yet free. The comments below are full of people doing the same work. Add yours, and the next person reading will know they are not alone in it. Subscribe to Logostoic, because building a mind that the world cannot operate at will is not the work of a single video. It is the work of returning, again and again, to ideas like these and practicing them until the stillness becomes who you are rather than something you attempt. That is what this channel is built for. If that is the kind of strength you actually want, you have found the right place. May you learn to hold your silence where others would speak, your stillness where others would break, and your own quiet center in a world built to take it from you.